My question is, if you, we don't have a whole lot of time, so answer quickly. Can you describe the perfect JFC meeting? So the JFC meeting is like the best thing in the world, but if you could describe who would be there, how many people would be there, what information they would have beforehand, and the way it would be run to increase efficiency, can you describe perfect meeting of the JFC allocations meeting?
Let's start with Nara.
Okay, so I would like to say that ideally it would be awesome if all JFC reps were present at all meetings, but considering how many times we have to meet, how often it's very late at night, that's not very realistic. So I would say if we could get at least 3/4 of the people there, I think that would be great. Secondly, so one of the issues is that usually there's one person presenting their budgets in one single session, and at that time there's usually a couple people who are paying very close attention and calling out like parts of the budget that they agree or don't agree with, and there's a couple of people who are paying attention, not really saying much, contributing to the conversation, and there's a couple of people doing homework. So obviously that's the part that needs to be changed the most, is that it would be awesome if everyone were engaged. At the very least, I think it would help out is if everybody had a chance to look over the budgets that we were allocating for that day beforehand. There used to be it used to be in the old budget tracker that all JFC reps had access to all the budgets. They could look at them. In the new system, that kind of admin function hasn't really been set up yet in a very good way. So obviously that would need to be improved, but basically if we could...
Let's hop over to the next.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, the ideal JFC meeting, yeah, I completely agree that everyone being present is an important factor in the perfect JFC meeting, but also when we are going through budgets, having someone who has an idea of what the organization is, who might not necessarily be in the organization, but also the JFC representative has to have notes on very detailed notes on what the organization needs, not just like take their budget and say, okay, it's great, but maybe ask them the questions like, oh, what are you using this for? What are you using this for? Get a very detailed line item by line item budget so that they can come back to JFC and say this is what they need to operate. If we do need to cut, this is what we can cut.
Okay. All right, next question.
Okay, again, if these answers could be quick since we are short on time. I was wondering how you actually plan on getting JFC representatives involved with the organizations that they represent and actually understanding what they do, because I think I've heard every JFC or every VPF candidate say this every year that they want to get JFC reps more involved. I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of great JFC reps. However, I've also sat in on JFC meetings where the representative really doesn't understand what the budget is. They don't know what quite large line items are. And in the end, it just kind of turns into every JFC rep around the table ridiculing the organization. How do you actually plan on getting JFC reps to kind of do what they're supposed to do for their organizations?
We'll start with Robert.
Yeah, I definitely believe in accountability. We definitely have to hold the JFC representatives accountable for their organizations. But also, like I was describing in that subcommittee that I want to form, I'm sure I can find people who would be very excited to work with organizations just across campus. There's so many varied interests. I know people who love to go to sports games, and I think just finding people who are interested and excited about the organization.
Okay, and real quick from Nara.
I think the most important thing is that the people sitting in the room, especially the JFC representing the organization that's being presented, needs to have been to at least a couple of the meetings or events that organization holds. This has been suggested in the JFC before, but it's never really been enforced by the VPFs. They always say, oh, try to go to one of their meetings. But since the VPF isn't holding the rest of the JFC accountable for that, it's never really happened. And I know from personal experience, there's a group I worked with this year, and the president who was meeting with me actually even remarked and said, this is so much easier because you've been to several of our events. I feel like you understand our organization. And I feel like that's what needs to be happening across the board.
Okay, and one last question.
Great. Okay, so speaking from experience, I've seen that a lot of spring break trips in the past, and this is really more at NARA because we've heard Rob's response to it, have been increasing the number of them, the scope of them, and their budgets, multi-$1,000 budgets. And because they don't get as much corporate funding or grant funding, they look to the JFC and the Student Senate. What is your stance on funding spring break trips from this point forward, and what are some suggestions you have for their funding?
Given the fact that we funded in the past, I don't think that we can break with policy drastically and say, okay, from now on, we're not funding you guys anymore at all. However, I do think that we need to put a little bit more pressure on the student organizations themselves to not depend too much on JFC and student government for their funding, because in general, JFC and student government's opinion has been that we're giving very large amounts of money to very small numbers of people, and we would prefer that they try to get the funding somewhere else. I know that since departmental funding, pretty much anything outside of student government is becoming tight. Obviously, this is a time when we kind of need to work together and counsel them some more, try to find some more grants and things like that. The other option is that several of these organizations hold multiple trips per year. And I would say if there's anything that's going to be cut back, instead of doing 2 trips, one during Christmas break and one during spring break, you maybe only should do 1.
All right, thank you. So I saw a couple more people that were lined up, and so I'd really encourage you guys to come up to these candidates after the meeting and throughout the week as elections are coming up, and get these questions cleared up so that you're a little bit better informed when Elections Day rolls around. So right now I'd like to thank Nara and Robert for their time and for their answers.